Ladies and gentlemen, Elaine!
When I was 17, I was nearly sexually assaulted by my high school sweetheart. I had such a crush on him. I told all my girlfriends how much he cared for me and did all these great things for me. I loved the way he made me feel. One day after school, we snuck over to his house. We sat and chatted, but I knew before I even went to his house that day, it was a mistake. I didn't listen to my gut. Well, one thing led to another, and the next thing I knew, I was flat on my back in his parents' master bedroom with no shirt on, and I was getting scared. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And as I lay there on my back, I beat myself up thinking, how did you get here? Just then, the doors flung open to that bedroom. It was his mom. She came home suddenly in the middle of the day. She was my angel that day. She didn't look away. She looked at me, she looked at him, and then she looked back at me and she said, "Get out of here," as if she knew what her son was capable of doing. I looked away that day. I looked away and didn't listen to my gut that said, don't go over there. And I'm asking you today, what is something in your life right now that you are looking away from? What are you in denial around? Denial means don't even know I'm lying. It's the lies that we tell ourselves because maybe we want to feel love, we want security. I took this same looking away at work too. I was at a job for 3 years. I never got a raise. I was unappreciated. But I made excuses. Oh, it's close to my kids' school. Well, I like the girls there. Well, it pays enough. But I looked away again. I looked away at the reality of what I was faced with. And that was to just look away at any problem that came up in my life. And pretty soon, that's like a pressure cooker. And it just builds up, and it just builds up, and it builds up. And finally, I was about up to here with the way I was so dissatisfied with my life. And then finally, it happened. That pressure cooker, it exploded. Have you ever felt that stress where you're about to just explode? That day came for me on a beautiful sunny day in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had finally become pregnant, which had taken years for me to do a series of various infertility treatments. And I was so happy. I was 8 months pregnant with my baby boy, Matthew. And as we walked, me and my then husband together, I caught my ankle on the side of the cement, and I went tumbling. First one leg, and then another leg, and then bang, right on my baby, Matthew. I was laying on that cement saying, my God, why me? Why right now? It's taken so long to get pregnant. And as I laid on that cement, the first thing I did was I just reached my arm up because I just needed to be saved in that moment by my husband. But there was no hand there. All I could see in the distance was his blue and orange t-shirt that said, Go Bears. I had looked away for years in my marriage. I had been treated so poorly. But again, I was in denial. I made excuses. I was well taken care of. It was going to be okay. He was going to change. But he wasn't. And as I lay on that ground, there's something that came over me like I've never felt before. Something that I couldn't do for myself, but I could do finally for my unborn baby. And there was a roar that came up. And I finally decided that day, that pressure cooker blew, and I no longer was willing to look away anymore from the truth of my life. Where are you looking away right now? Are you maybe gaining weight and you're looking away from that because you still want to eat those cookies? Are you looking away at that relationship that's just not nourishing and loving and supportive? Well, like any pressure cooker that explodes, it sort of looked like this, like, ah, ah! And that was the noise in my life. That was the noise that kept me from hearing my soul's voice and my truth. There was one solution for me that day. I decided, and if we could all raise our hands, and please repeat these 2 words after me. Get quiet.
Get quiet.
And that's the peace sign. Because what I realized in that moment is that I needed to get quiet. I needed to find peace in my life. I needed to provide myself a space where I could just be with myself, hear my own soul's voice. What was I yearning for? Do you have that quiet space that you can be in? And if you do, you know what you know how I'm feeling. And if you don't, I would love for you right now, if you could, to please close your eyes, because I would love for you to feel what this quiet feels like for me. And with 3 deep breaths on your own, think about the inner peace that will come into your life. Think about that little voice that you want to get reacquainted with, that will guide you and support you. And please open your eyes. It's been 19 years since I fell on my baby Matthew. He's now 19. And I have dedicated every day of my life to this quiet that you just felt. Because I know that in this quiet is where we hear the truth. We can no longer look away at our lives when we know what's true. So I invite you today that if you do have that place of quiet, then continue to go there. And if this is new to you, I would invite you to find that place for yourself where you can find peace and quiet and calm. I now have the most incredible love and support of my new fiance. He's always there to lift me up. I have an amazing new job that I found in my own quiet because I followed my heart. And I have 2 beautiful boys that I teach this to so that they can also find their truth, their passion, and honor themselves and everyone around them. So go and get quiet.
All right. Let's round it out. Or no, we got two more. Elaine.
All right, I'm going to start. Elaine. First of all, I loved seeing female energy in front of the room. I welcome that. I noticed at the beginning of your speech, because you started in a very hard place with respects to the sexual assault, and so there's a real fine line of being able to come up and still have that levity and kind of connection with the audience, and then allowing yourself to drop into the story. I was seeing you drop into the story before the story started, so my first perception of you is you were kind of hard and disconnected, which I don't think that's what you wanted to be in the moment, but I think you were just dropping into the story. So I would say own the levity of and the connection that you can create before the timer starts. Okay, and that's very subtle. Like you'll see it in the speech. It was like you were almost method acting, like you kind of in your face. And you just don't need to do that because you have access to that energy whenever. Stay conscious of your audience. And maybe after, I kind of thought in the beginning, you could have started where you wanted to end, where maybe starting with a moment of your own 3 deep breaths and the joy that that gives you to be in your silence. And that sense of you showing me the peace and the joy without having to explain it, and then drop into, I want to share with you a story. And you could still be light, but it's a story, and then get deep. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? You have a calm, powerful energy. I want to ask a question. How scripted were you?
Probably about 70%.
Okay. So I just want you to know, for me, that question was in my mind, and there's nothing wrong with having a script. It's the discipline of throwing the script away. And so the fact that I wrote it down, I just want you to know that in my mind I was thinking, how scripted is she? Okay? Because the goal is to be scripted and then throw your script away and feel natural. So that's so there was moments that I felt like what you were doing was searching for your script rather than staying in the moment of connecting with the audience. Okay. It was my opinion you didn't need to go back to the sexual assault. And this is just a piece of advice for me. When you say something like, I was almost sexually assaulted, I think you lose your audience. Not that I'm devaluing your story. I'm just saying I don't think it's a strong enough experience to anchor the first story in. When you were laying on your stomach, 8 months pregnant, and you reached your hand up, that absolutely snockered me. I was like, notes down in your story going, oh my God. And when you said, and all I could see was, go Bears. And why didn't he go to his wife? Like, that was like where I was just like, oh, and I want to give you some perspective. Like, you went from high school to your son's 19. Like, you covered a lot of ground. So that, I just want to let you know that was big for me. I wanted you to let the audience dig around in the quiet a little more, because I want to know the juiciness of your quiet. And so some of the things that I wrote down is that in your quiet is your wants, in your quiet is your peace, in your quiet are your answers, in your quiet is your strength, in your quiet is your joy, in your quiet is your permission, in your quiet is you. Like, I was wanting you to let me revel in what is the juice that you get from the quiet. So that is just some feedback for that. Because I thought the looking away felt quiet to me until you went, ah, which I kind of liked. I kind of liked you got noisy, you got bigger. But the get quiet, I wanted you to give me more juiciness of it. Because I didn't connect with, what does she get in the quiet? But there's obviously something really there that you get. You're beautiful to look at, and I'm not speaking to you physically. I'm talking to you powerfully. You have a great presence. You stand with strength. You're wonderful to watch. I wanted to listen to you. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would agree with Susan when you were talking about falling down and being pregnant. It was like, I mean, I don't think anybody could do anything except it was pencils down and just, we are in this with you. And you know what you also did with that is that was out there, and then we actually didn't know what happened for a while. You know, to your son, like what you fell down, what happened, and so I was like, what happened? What, you know, and I think sometimes those things are great. You know, when Sean starts his story about, well, what did happen at the White House or whatever. We want to find, you know, we stick with you because we want to know what the ending is. I think you did a great job with that story. I think one of the reasons that it also worked well is your baby had a name. It was Baby Matthew. It wasn't just my baby. It was Baby Matthew. And we were like all cheering for Baby Matthew. There's something I think that you can use with Go Bears. Maybe even literally start the speech with those two words. You know, just like, what is Go Bears? And just, you know, drop it in. And then, and we're waiting to come back to what Go Bears means. Or maybe you saw the word go. You know, so I think there is something there. When you say, you mentioned to the audience, like how many of you, and this is, again, a general note, you mentioned like how many of you do this, how many of you eat those cookies when you know you shouldn't. Sometimes even, again, I'm a big fan of the names, naming the cookies. Like, what cookies do we all eat? You know, how many of us had the little Hilton Garden Inn oatmeal cookies last night? You know, so we all like connect, like, yeah, okay, we get it. So, you know, I'm a big fan of the naming people and naming things as well. So we're like, yeah, I've had those cookies, or I've had the Girl Scout cookies, maybe if it's in the sea, Thin Mints, yeah, Thin Mints. Yeah, I would also agree with Susan. You did cover a very long timeline, and to me, the Baby Matthew story was powerful enough. The story at the beginning, it worked, but I you know, in an hour speech, maybe it fits in, but it certainly was not nearly as powerful as the Baby Matthew story. So something to think about, either maybe cutting it, downplaying it, or really working on that to make it on the par with that story about your child.
Okay. And if you could make a reference, Pete, before you hand the mic over. When you guys were deliberating, you talked about the almost word cuts people off.
Sure.
Like I almost had, so can you make reference to that?
Yeah, what Susan was mentioning, whenever if somebody were to say, I almost got in a car accident, it's, unless that story is...
Like Cody exploding, or Jamie actually getting raped. Yeah, it's almost like somebody in the audience could end up resenting you the more I think about this, being
So
like,
yeah, I was.
actually it finished for me.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So, okay, so Elaine, I liked your acronym. Is that yours? About denial?
It's a general acronym that
We've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
I wrote it down. I was like, that's brilliant.
I think you should claim that. And just,
claim it.
Trademark.
so don't even know
I am lying.
I am lying. That's so good.
Yeah.
Don't even know I'm lying.
Even though no
Denial. So great. I felt like you didn't involve the audience until 5 minutes and 52 seconds in. You didn't pull us in. You didn't ask questions of us. You didn't reference us. And in a 10-minute talk, that means over half the talk, I'm having to do the math on how I'm like you or why I need to listen to you. If you could grab the audience sooner with their own life, the better. So, like, when you start with an activity that unifies or is playful or gets people thinking, or even within the first minute, like when you're scared, you were talking about being on the bed. And how many of you have ever been in a compromised position where you weren't quite sure how it was going to end and you were scared? See, because you're taking sexuality out of it now, and you're getting, all of us have been in compromised positions where we didn't know how it was going to end. And that references to what Susan's saying is, I'm always talking to you guys about how, get the global human experience. Talk about, maybe this wasn't a scar in your body, but it was a scar in your marriage. Like, Susan made it even better, which is, if you can get the audience to get enough detail that they can come up with how it's like them without spoon feeding them, that's the ideal. The more I keep thinking about that as speakers, we want to pull out of them what's already there, not plant into them what may not be. I feel like um, it was great to hear your quiet activity. That's when you hit your stride. When you talk about quiet, you come to life. Like you make quiet cool, and I think quiet's lame. And I like, yeah, I'm like quiet. Quiet is for boring people that don't have anything cool to say. Like I have a real resentment towards quiet. But when you talk about it, I'm like,
Weird that he married me.
yeah, I gotta figure out some shit, right? So I feel like when you talk about quiet, it makes me wonder. Well, what's that all about? Like you're very passionate when you talk about that. I wanted to see that passion throughout the whole talk. There was a tenseness to you for about 5 minutes in that talk. You didn't blossom until about 5 minutes in. If you had started in a blossom space, and it doesn't mean you can't tell serious stories, because you were starting to blossom when you talked about falling down when you were pregnant. Yeah. See, blossom isn't like it's when it's all lovey-dovey. It means you're shining. You're beaming with your powers in front of the room. I also felt like there was one thing about the Go Bears story that I would have liked to have had is I want to be guaranteed that he just kept walking because many of us have walked alongside somebody paying attention to other things and we don't realize that that person just tripped. I want to know that that's the way he was in the marriage. He always just kept walking. He wasn't there. I want to know that it wasn't like he had just had a bad day. You know what I mean? And I also felt like from the dress rehearsal, you pulled out the 50-cent raise thing. And I felt that that was important. She talked about in her dress rehearsal that when she was in the.
About that, I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
Good.
When she worked at the dentist office in her job, they gave her a 50-cent raise and she thought it was an accident. And they're like, oh no, it's your raise. And she's like, what the hell am I going to do with 50 cents more an hour? Like, that's nothing. And that's what your breaking point. Like, I was hoping you come back to the breaking point on each of these three stories. I hit the breaking point when I left that boy's room and I realized that I won't be treated that way. I hit the breaking point with the dentist when I realized that all they saw me as 50 cents more. I hit the breaking point with my husband when I was on the ground and he just kept walking. And then you can tie it into where you are now. I'm glad you added that. That was new. I am in this great relationship with a man that is there for me. You know, a man whose hand is there whenever I need him most. It allows you to pull things back. I think that would make it a lot better. Overall, I think that you've come a very long way, too. I've seen your progress. I know how scared you were to do speaking in general. And I just like that you are enduring the process of growth. And with more practice, each of you will find that speaking will become a skill. It will no longer become, if you have it at all, a fear. Mm-hmm. That it will become a flow where you will stop thinking about there being a crowd there. You won't be worried about, like, how's the crowd reacting. Instead, you'll be fine-tuning your own talent as you're up on stage. Like, Susan, Peter, and I all speak a lot. And I'm guessing, you guys back me up here if you agree, I'm guessing you don't think very often of, like, I hope this audience likes me. Or, you know, like, I'm afraid to get in front of this crowd. Like, those don't hit us at all anymore.
No, I'm excited to create an experience. I want to create a connection. I'm excited about what's going to come out of the room. It's that sense of it now becomes about what are you generating with the audience. So your story is a service. It's your love offering. So what is it that you're offering? You know, what's the offer in the story? And what you're inviting people to do is try this method, try this. Allow yourself in your loud life to get quiet. You know, so it's that you're making it really as a love offering. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's give Elaine a big hand. What?
Oh boy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Go Bears.
Go Bears!
Go Bears is so good. Go Bears.
Dicka. Little Dicka.
Seriously.
Really good.
So I agree with what these guys said about the first story. I think that if you wanted to use it, it would be better placed later. I love the "she didn't look away." And that kind of reminded me of Sean's story. If you've heard the one where he is a little kid and he's sick and he goes to the bathroom in his pants and he has a neighbor come over and help clean him up. And one of the most powerful pieces of that story is she's like, just keep looking at me, like, you got this, keep going. But that's not the main story. He's just using that as an example of that. And I think you could do that same thing with that sexual assault story of, this was a woman who was an example of somebody who didn't look away.
Yeah.
And I needed to learn that throughout the course of all these things that I'm telling you. So the story is fine, but I just would place it in a different position, especially in a 10-minute talk. If you've got an hour, there's way more room
Did you
to roam.
forget to add that, or did you think it was not necessary? Because we talked about that in the rehearsal. Yeah, I'm grateful that the mother didn't look away.
I said that.
No.
He said
No,
that,
she
that
did
didn't
say.
look
Yeah.
away.
Yeah,
Well, then you didn't come back to it at the end, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's because I decided, I decided to close that story and
Yeah.
not move back.
Got it.
Anyway, it could be really, really powerful because I wrote that down and quoted, she didn't look away. Like, that's powerful in and of itself. There was one point, and this was before Sean mentioned, 5 minutes and 52?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't write down the exact time, but I noticed that you had this uncomfortable pause somewhere near the beginning that I was like, oh, like, come on, just drop in, like, you got this. And what started, I think, close to the 5:52 was, again, the detail that Peter's been talking about, baby boy Matthew. Like, that makes it real for us. It makes it somebody that we can relate to. It's a person. He has a name. That's so good. Also with the detail, Go Bears, blue and orange. All those details are awesome because that allows us to see it, to visualize what you're telling us. So again, show instead of telling. Awesome example of that. It was after that I felt like that you got into flow. When you said he's now 19, the audience celebrates that for you. It's like, yay, that kid lived, like he's fine, he's 19, this is awesome.
He's
So
retarded, but
Sean, really. Awesome use of callback with looking away, great eye contact. One of the things that I wrote down, which I liked a lot, and I don't remember now what specifically you were saying, but when you watch it back, you said, if this is new to you. And I thought that was very inclusive because when you're speaking to a full group of people, it's like, who knows who's in the audience, and they could know about what you're talking about or not. And you invited us all in. So whether we knew it or not, hey, if this is new to you, this is what I'm talking about. That's very inclusive. So nice job on that. That was on my notes. Really, really awesome. But 50 Cent, I would put back in as one more detail.
Yeah.
Really good.
50 Cent.
50 Cent.
Like a rapper.
What do you think, Coach? Let's pass it over to Angela.
I watched Elaine grow with leaps and bounds, and I know that one of the things that she wanted to work on, Elaine wanted to work on, was just being vulnerable. And I think that you really accomplished that in terms of really helping us go into your life. And rather than glossing it over and telling your life story, you actually were helping us feel. So, and I love your message. So, yeah, awesome.
Us quiet people are celebrating.
Yeah,
like,
it's like yeah.
I have something for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick, I was concerned about what happened to Matthew when you fell. And I don't know, I didn't get, being like, was he hurt? Did you have to go to the hospital? I was concerned about what happened there. So.
I don't know if you touched this because I ran to the potty real fast, but I got this from Mindy about starting in scene always. I think the beginning, the almost, kind of threw me off too because it was like, okay, so why are you telling me this if it's an almost? Or you could start in scene like I'm laying there with my shirt off and I hear the door bust open and I thought to myself, how did I get here? And then stop and then go on with everything and then you can go back and say, that's when I realized I wasn't listening. So you can kind of like tie it all back in.
Yeah.
That changes the scene.
Yeah.
I almost.
Because I'm like in it with you, like, oh crap, what happened? Like, what happened? You know?
And the positive details of the relationship are kind of mute at that point. We don't need to know that you really liked him and that he was great and that, so maybe some of the details could drop away and you can just jump in more into that. Yeah.
Outside, you told
Jeremy and I, that at home there's a labyrinth that you go through, and in the center, that's where you have your quiet space. When you told me that, it painted a picture, and life can sometimes feel like a labyrinth, you know, with endless decisions, constant left, right, backwards. We start back at the beginning. And I think maybe if you incorporated it at some point in your talk, it paints a really nice picture, and, you know, you can kind of bring people to the center, you know, your quiet space, and introduce it to them. And I don't know, I had value from that outside, so I think incorporating it would be cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, like
Any
talking
other
about it
comments?
makes me go, I want to know about the labyrinth.
Yeah. Any other comments from the audience for Elaine? All right, let's give it up for Elaine.